Hungarian Folk Tales. The Hare and the Hedgehog. One sunny summer day, a hare and a hedgehog met in the meadow. The hare began to tease the hedgehog and said, "Hey, hedgehog, how can you even walk alone, let run with those stumpy little legs of yours?" This upset the hedgehog. "Well, I'm sure I can run faster with my little legs than you can run with your lanky long ones." Now the hare was upset. "I don't believe that." "Well, if you don't believe it, Hare, let's make a wager." So the two of them placed their wagers, and then the hare said to the hedgehog, "Well then, hedgehog, shall we race?" To this the hedgehog said, "Tomorrow morning, when the 8 o'clock train leaves the station." The hare said, "But why not now, hedgehog? Because I have to go home to eat my supper. Let's meet again here tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock sharp." So the hedgehog went home. After they had eaten, the hedgehog told his wife what had happened. "Just imagine, I made a wager with the hare that I can run faster than him." The hedgehog's wife said, "Don't be foolish. How could you possibly run faster than the hare?" "Well, we'll find that out tomorrow morning." The following morning, the hedgehogs got up, ate a hearty breakfast, and went out to the meadow. They didn't go to the place where they should meet the hare, but instead stood at the other end of the meadow. Then the hedgehog told his wife to hide herself in a furrow. He told her, "When the hare arrives, you are to shout out, 'I'm already here, hare!'" Then the hedgehog walked to the far end of the meadow where he met the hare. "Hello there, hare." "Hello there, hedgehog. Are you ready to race?" "Yes, I am." "Then shall we run?" "Yes, let's run." "But how shall we run over such a bumpy field?" The hedgehog said, "It's simple. I shall run in one furrow and you in another, and so we won't bump into each other while we're racing." "That sounds like a very good idea." Then the hare stood ready in one furrow and the hedgehog in another, and the hedgehog told the hare, "I shall count, and when I get to 3, we start to run." And then the hedgehog counted, 1, 2, 3. Then they both began to run, but the hedgehog only ran 2 steps and hid himself deep in the furrow. But the hedgehog's wife was sitting waiting at the other end of the meadow when the hare arrived, and she shouted, "I'm already here, hare!" And the hare said, "That was no good. Let's race again." Then they turned back and began to run in the opposite direction, but this time the hedgehog's wife only ran 2 steps and hid herself deep in the furrow. The hare did his best to run faster than he had ever run before. But when the hare arrived back at the beginning of the meadow, the hedgehog said, I'm already here, Hare. That was no good. Let's race once more. So they turned around and ran back again, but the hedgehog quickly hid in the furrow again. The poor hare ran as fast as his legs would carry him, and when he got to the other end of the meadow, the hedgehog's wife said, I'm already here, Hare. That was no good, said the hare. Let's run one last time. But the foolish hare felt dizzy and his legs began to tremble, and he stood in the middle of the meadow, too tired to continue. The little hedgehogs laughed at the silly hare. They had won. The pair of them laughed all the way home, and they are probably still laughing to this very day. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Shepherd and the Snake. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there lived a poor shepherd boy. The only thing the shepherd boy possessed was a little donkey, and he spent his days guarding the mayor's flock of sheep. He sat watching the flock one day and thinking how unfair it was that some people had money and were rich, while others had none and were poor. He sat thinking and thinking when he suddenly heard the sound of crying. "Help me! Help me!" The boy followed the sound of crying and walked to a hole in the ground, where he came upon a yellow-bellied snake wriggling in a fire. "Help me, shepherd boy, and I will soon repay the favour." So the boy held out his stick, and the yellow-bellied snake slithered up it and out of the fiery flames. Then the snake said, "Follow me, and you should know that my father is the king of all snakes." The yellow-bellied snake slithered along, and the young shepherd walked quickly behind. He left his donkey to watch over the sheep. The boy followed the snake until they found themselves in a forest, where the yellow-bellied snake suddenly slithered under a flat stone. The snake shouted back, "Push the stone away and follow me." The young shepherd did as the snake had said and revealed steps going down into the ground. And he walked down and down and down until he arrived in a beautiful diamond meadow. "This is my father's palace." And the gate to the palace was guarded by two very large snakes. There the yellow-bellied snake slithered in, and the young shepherd followed close behind. They passed through one room after the other until they arrived at the throne room that sparkled with silver and gems. The walls were studded with diamonds, and everything was decorated in precious metal. The Snake King was sitting proudly on an enormous throne, and when he wanted to give his servants an order, he would simply flick his tail and bells would ring. Then the yellow-bellied snake hurried up to the king and embraced him. "Father dear, don't harm this poor shepherd boy because he saved me from the fire." "Now, young shepherd boy, you may choose from two things as your reward for saving my son. You can learn to speak to all the animals, or I can give you a bag of gold. The poor shepherd boy thought hard because he was sorely tempted by the promise of riches, but he would never ever have the chance to learn the language of the animals again. And so that is what he chose. "Come here, my child," said the Snake King. So the young shepherd boy approached the fearsome snake, and the king hissed in his ear, and he instantly understood what the king was saying to his snake son. So then the poor shepherd boy bid farewell to the yellow-bellied snake and his father the king, and started to walk back the way he had come. He walked on until he came to the beautiful meadow, climbed back up the underground steps, and re-emerged into his own world once more. Then he herded his sheep up and sat down to reflect on all that had happened to him that day. And as he sat there, 2 tiny birds flew up and landed in the top of a tree, where they sat talking to each other. Did you know? If that poor shepherd boy only knew what lies at the foot of this tree, he would not stay poor for one day more. But the young shepherd heard this and understood all they said. So he swiftly drove his sheep back to their owner, picked up his sharpest axe, and walked back to the forest to the tree where he had sat. And he dug until he discovered, to his great delight, a big pot of gold. As evening fell, he took the gold home and never had to watch the mare's sheep again. Then he soon bought a beautiful house with plenty of land, married his bride, and they both lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. The 7 Kids. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there lived a mother goat, and the mother goat had 7 young kids. One day the mother goat said, "Now be careful, children, because I'm going to the meadow to bring you fresh grass to eat." "Don't worry, we'll be good," the little kids said. So the old mother goat set off for the meadow, and then she shouted back, "And don't let any strangers in, because I won't be back until evening." The wily wolf had been listening outside all this time. Well, he thought, I have my chance at long last. Hardly an hour had passed before the wily wolf went to the window and called into the kids. "Darling children, open the door because I have brought fresh grass for you to eat." The little kids laughed when they heard his gruff voice, "But our mother will only be back in the evening, and her voice is much sweeter than yours." The wolf was furious and ran away until he came to a field full of turnips. There he pulled up a turnip from the ground and ate it to make his mouth dry and his voice sweet. Then he hurried back to the house and called to the kids, "Darling children, open the door because I have brought you fresh grass to eat." And the little kids were about to open the door when the eldest looked out of the window and saw the wily wolf's bony black hand and shouted, "Don't open the door because our mother has white hands, not black." The wolf was furious for a second time. Then he thought for a moment and ran until he came to the village bakery. When he arrived, he asked the baker for a sack of flour to make his hands white, but the baker was busy kneading bread and asked him to wait. But the wily wolf was very impatient and could not wait a moment longer. "I'll be dining on goat meat tonight," and he hurried back to the house. By the time he arrived back, it was late in the day, and he put his hand up onto the windowsill. With his white hand and his sweet voice, the kids were convinced that their mother had returned from the meadow at last. Then the wolf shouted into the kids, "Darling children, open the door because I have brought you fresh grass to eat." And the silly kids jumped for joy because they had fresh grass at last. One kid hid under the bench, the second in the corn bin, the third in the ash bucket, the fourth in the wash basin. The three other kids stood petrified in the middle of the room. They were all so terrified that they would happily have hidden in a matchbox, but there was none in the house because their father did not smoke a pipe. Then the wily wolf pulled the kid out from under the bench, the kid out of the corn bin, the kid out of the ash bucket, but the clock door was so small that his long tongue wouldn't fit inside. "Oh, how full I am," he said, and stroked his fat belly. Then the wolf went out to the meadow where he lay under the mulberry tree and soon fell fast asleep. As evening fell, the mother goat returned home from the meadow and nearly died of shock when she saw the door wide open and her little house empty. She began to call, "Kiddie, kiddie, come here." She was sitting and crying when she suddenly heard a tiny voice speak, "Don't cry, mother dear, because I am here." Then the last of her kids appeared, who was delighted to see his mother, but even more delighted to see the fresh green grass. "And where are your brothers?" Then the little kid told his mother how the wily wolf had tricked them. "Oh," his mother said, "so that is who I saw resting in the meadow when I was walking home. Hurry, child, and fetch me a needle, thread, and a pair of sharp scissors." And while her son searched, the mother goat took a rest after a very tiring day indeed. They soon arrived at the meadow, where they saw that the wolf was still sleeping. "Gather rocks, quickly, quickly!" Then the mother goat slit the wily wolf's belly open, and the other 6 kids leapt out. "Now let's teach the wily wolf a lesson," the mother goat said, "and fetch as many rocks as you can while he is still asleep." They soon collected a big pile of rocks and packed them into the wily wolf's belly before their old mother stitched it back up again. Then she told her kids to hurry back home because the wolf would surely be in a terrible mood when he awoke. So the 7 kids all ran back to the house and watched from the window to see the wolf awake. When the wily wolf awoke, he was very thirsty and he thought to himself, "I shall go down to the stream and take a drink because the 6 kids in my belly must be really thirsty." The wily wolf struggled to his feet and he smiled to himself when he heard the rocks rumbling in his belly. When he got to the stream, he leant down to take a good drink, but the rocks in his belly were so heavy that he fell headfirst into the water and was washed clean away. The wolf floated on the water, and the stream passed right before the kids' house, and they laughed when they saw the wily wolf wash past. But the wolf could not swim and was drowned in the deep. And if that wily wolf had not drowned, my tale would have never ended. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Pink Pig. Once upon a time, in a tiny village, there lived an old woman who never had a child of her own. And she was once overheard saying that she would not really care if God gave her a puppy, just as long as she had a young one to raise. The years went by and the woman eventually gave birth to a baby. But it was actually a baby pig. And it was only then she remembered what she had said about God giving her a baby to raise. But what could she do? Now she had a pink pig, and it was her duty to raise it as best she could. The women of the village would gather in the day and gossip, and the pink pig would always sit with its mother and chuckle happily to itself. Let me tell you that the reason your little pink pig squeals so is that it wants to go to school with the other boys and girls in the village. Please don't mock me so, the mother of the pink pig said, who felt sadly ashamed to have such a child. But the rest of the women nagged her until she eventually sent the pink pig to school in the village. And there the pink pig continued to squeal for the teacher until she threw a book at the pink pig to silence it. The pink pig's nose moved from letter to letter until it eventually learned to read like the other children. One day the children all went off to pick strawberries and the pink pig wanted to join them, but its mother wouldn't let it go. But the neighbours nagged her until she eventually agreed. And as the other children all carried baskets, the pink pig wanted one too, and so its mother hung a little basket on its snout. The boy who lived next door was exactly the same age as the little pink pig, and his mother told him to take very good care of the pig that afternoon. Then the pink pig lagged behind the others on their way and it slipped out of its pigskin. And when it took it off, it was plain for all the world to see that the pink pig was the most beautiful little girl in the land. The pretty little girl quickly filled her basket and then slipped her pigskin back on and went to join the others. The boy next door saw all of this, but he did not say a word. All the children's parents began to worry about their offspring, and so they stood out on the road as they waited for them to come home. Look, the pink pig has bought strawberries too. Who could have filled its basket? The pink pig, the boy said, but he said nothing more of what he had seen. When the children grew up, the boys began to court the girls, and the boy next door went to see the pink pig. His father and mother watched forlornly and wondered what their son wanted from such an ugly beast. But the boy next door never gave up, and he only ever visited the pink pig. At last the time came to marry for the boy next door. Whom will you marry, son? Why, the pink pig, of course. Don't shame us, son. We are old and respected, so don't discredit us now. But his father could clearly see that the boy next door was determined to make the pink pig his bride for life. So he gathered his friends together and went to ask for the pig's hand in marriage. Sadly, my son will never get married if the pink pig refuses his request. The peculiar couple were engaged to be married for some time, and people gathered from far and near to witness their wedding, as it was not every day that a man married a pig. After the wedding feast, the young couple went up to the loft as was the custom. The boy next door had told his mother everything, and he had also told her to take good care and burn the pigskin when they threw it down. The band played when the young couple went up to the loft, and it played when they came down again. The pink pig had gone, and a beautiful girl appeared in its place. Everyone was bewildered by the beauty of the girl, who had once been a pink pig. And that is the end of the Pink Pig's curly tail. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Goat Soldiers. A long time ago, in a distant land, there lived a poor lad. His mother and father both died when he was young, and he was all alone. He was poor, he had no one, and so the poor lad became a shepherd. He was still tending sheep when it came time to become a soldier. So he went straight into the army from his flock of sheep. He served his 3 years, and when he returned, he was so poor that he didn't know what to do or where to look. He had nothing to his name and hardly any clothes. There was a farmer who owned a flock of 30 goats, who needed a goat herd, who could herd the goats during the day and milk them every morning, noon and night, and keep their stable clean and tidy. The young lad happened to be passing and took the job straight away and led the goats out to the nearby meadow. But the young lad was no ordinary goat herd. He was sharp and witty and had learned a couple of clever tricks during his time as a soldier. So he talked to the goats all of the time and ordered them around in a military fashion until they learned to understand his simple commands. He marched them up and down, and by the time he was finished, he could get them to parade around the meadow like a miniature army. One day the lad saw a rich man in a carriage riding past the meadow, so he drove the herd of goats to the side of the road, where he waved, and the rich man stopped his carriage. The lad said, "The reason I stopped you, sir, is to show you what these goats have learnt to do since I have been their goat herd." The rich man in the carriage was very impressed with their performance and asked, "Who owns these goat soldiers?" "Why, they belong to the local farmer." The rich man was so impressed that he purchased all 30 goats, but insisted that the young lad should go and work for him for a month. Then the rich man invited all of his rich friends to come and see for themselves. "I want to show you something very interesting, something you've never seen in your life before." A gentleman from a foreign land liked the performance so much that he begged to buy the herd of goats. And so the rich man sold them to him. The foreign gentleman reached into his pocket and paid the price, and the rich man gave all the money to the goat herd, who used the money to buy a plot of land, build a fine house, and buy himself some good clothes, and to live a proper life like other people did. And he lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Foolish Man. Many, many years ago, in a land far, far away, there lived a man and his wife. And I'm sorry to tell you that the man was not very clever. In fact, the man was a fool. And every day his wife had to tell him what to do and how to do it. The man and his wife had a cow, and one day his wife said, "Why don't you take the cow to market to sell it?" So the man dressed her foolish husband in his best clothes, and he left for the market with the cow. It was a very hot summer's day, and a cloud of flies began to bother the cow and make it run back and forth all over the place. And as they were walking, they met a man with a pig. "Kind sir, wouldn't you prefer to swap your troublesome cow for this pig?" "Oh, but of course I would," he said, and they made the exchange. So now the foolish man had a pig, but the pig was harder to control than the cow had been, and the foolish man did not like it at all. And as they were walking, they met a man carrying a goose. "Kind sir, wouldn't you prefer to swap your troublesome pig for this goose?" Oh, but of course I would. Well, the goose was no better. It made a terrible mess, its feathers stuck to the foolish man's clothes, and he soon grew tired of carrying it. As they walked, they passed a man by the side of the road who was selling sharpening stones, and the man said, "Kind sir, wouldn't you prefer to swap your troublesome goose for this sharpening stone?" "Oh, but of course I would." So the foolish man was now left with nothing more than a sharpening stone, and he turned around and set off back home. And as he walked, he passed a pond with ducks swimming on it. The foolish man thought he would like to take a duck home for his wife, so he threw the sharpening stone, it sank into the pond, and all the ducks flew away. Now what am I going to do? No cow, no pig, no goose, no sharpening stone, no nothing. So he took off all his clothes and waded into the pond to find the sharpening stone. He searched the pond but could not find it anywhere. And when he came out of the water, he discovered that someone had stolen all of his clothes. So the foolish man was forced to walk home naked. The foolish man was very hungry when he got home, and so he cut himself a slice of bread and went down into the cellar to have a drink of wine. So he put the bread on the step and looked around to see that the dog had made off with it. He then threw the wine tap at the dog, so all the wine spilled out of the barrel onto the floor. A goose sat in the corner hatching eggs, and the goose said, "Gaggle, gaggle, gaggle." "You're going to tell my wife?" "Gaggle, gaggle, gaggle, hiss, hiss." And the goose went on making a terrible din. So the foolish man grabbed the goose, wrung its neck, and threw it out into the yard. Then he poured a bag of flour into the wine and some feathers, rolled around in it, and sat on the eggs. His wife then came down into the cellar and said, "What on earth is going on here?" She looked around at the spilled wine, the flour, and the feathers, and saw something sitting on the eggs. "What kind of monster is this? You had better say something before I knock your head off. It's me, dear wife. Don't hurt me." "Where's the cow?" "I swapped it for a pig." "So where's the pig?" "I swapped it for a goose." "So where's the goose?" "I swapped it for a sharpening stone." "So where's the sharpening stone?" "I threw it into the pond. I wanted to hit a duck so I could bring it home to you." "And where are your clothes?" "Somebody stole them while I was looking for the sharpening stone." "Oh, you foolish man." And she pulled him off the eggs and gave him the beating of his life. The foolish man's wife never sent him anywhere again after that, and did everything herself because it was safer that way. And that is the end of my story. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Frog, the Mouse, and the Sausage. A long time ago, far, far away, there lived a little frog. And the frog met a mouse and a sausage. All three began to talk, and they decided to become best friends for life. The mouse did all the cleaning, the frog did all the shopping, and the sausage cooked all the food. And the three friends lived like this for a month and a day. The sausage cooked such delicious food that they were always left licking their lips. And no matter how much they ate, it was never enough because the food was so delicious. When the month was over, the sausage said, "We should really take turns, so who is going to cook the food instead of me?" "Why not the frog?" they said. So then they made the frog their cook. The frog tried this kind of dish, and that kind of dish, and that kind of dish, and this kind of dish, but he could never cook anything the others liked to eat. He carried on cooking for a couple of days, but then they asked him to stop. "You are a very bad cook, Frog," they told him. The frog felt very ashamed. "Well then, croak, who will do the cooking now?" So the sausage said, "We'll make it the mouse's job." So the mouse became the cook. And it cooked for a couple of days, but it cooked so badly that it asked the sausage, "Why don't you cook instead of us?" "Yes, croak, why don't you cook instead?" the frog asked. But the sausage could only say, "I had my turn of cooking, and if you don't want to cook, then we'll have to break this friendship up." But they begged and begged the sausage until it finally agreed to cook for a couple of days more. The frog thought it could learn to cook by watching the sausage. Well, when the soup was nearly done, the sausage pulled it aside. And when it thought nobody was looking, it jumped into the soup. Aha! Croak. Now I know why the soup tastes so good. Because the sausage always jumps into it first. Now I know how to cook. Then the frog offered to cook for them again. Now I will be the cook, Croak. I know how to cook. So the frog put a big pot of water on the stove and made a big fire to get it good and hot. And it cooked it and cooked it. When it thought that the contents of the pot had cooked enough, the frog didn't wait for it to cool, but hopped right into the boiling hot soup. Well, The water was so terribly hot that it made the poor frog's skin all slimy and wrinkled, and that is where toads come from. Then the frog had to stop cooking because the hot soup had scalded it so. The mouse and the sausage laughed at the foolish frog when it told them the story, and they decided not to be friends any longer. So they all went their separate ways, and they all lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Bear and the Cat. Many, many years ago, in a land far, far away, there lived a bear. And one day, the bear met a cat and said, "Let us work together, cat, and build a house." So the two of them worked together, and they built a house in the forest. When the autumn came, the leaves began to fall, and the bear said, "The winter will soon be here. Let us work together, cat, and collect some food." So the two of them bought a bucket, went deep into the forest, and filled the bucket with wild honey. Then they got a second bucket and filled it with fat, and carried the buckets up to the attic. The winter that came was a very bleak one indeed, with plenty of wind, lots of snow, and very cold days. So the bear lay down to go to sleep, while the cat watched over the fire and sat comfy in the warmth. But then the cat slowly became hungry and wondered how it could get out of the house so it could climb up into the attic to eat from the buckets of honey and fat. "Where are you going, cat?" "You will never believe me, but a mouse just came past and invited me to a baptism." "The mouse has just had a baby and says it wants me to be the baby's godfather." "Very well, then you had better go," said the bear. So then the cat sneaked up to the attic and ate a quarter of the honey and a quarter of the fat and sneaked back down again. "Oh, you're home from the baptism. What's the little one's name?" "A quarter." "How about that? I've never heard of a name like that." Time went by, and the cat got hungry again. "Hey, cat, where are you going?" "Well, you will never believe me, but another little mouse came by and invited me to another baptism." "Very well, then you had better go." "You're home again soon?" "That's right," said the cat. "And what's the little one's name?" "A half." After a few days, the cat got hungry again and quietly opened the door. "Where are you going, cat?" "You will never believe me, but I've been invited to another baptism. Another baby mouse was born, and I'm to be its godfather."
"Very well, then you had better go." "So what's the little one's name?"
"Nothing."
"Oh my, that's the strangest name of all."
When the spring came at last, the bear woke from its winter sleep, thin and hungry as it had not eaten since the autumn. "But everything is fine because we have plenty of honey and fat in the attic. Cat, please fetch some and we'll make delicious pancakes with honey."
"Go up to the attic, Cat, and fetch the 2 buckets down."
"Oh, but I'm so dizzy." So very, very dizzy. And we all know that cats don't get dizzy, don't we? But the cat was pretending.
"Very well, I'll go and get it myself,"
said the bear. So the bear went up to the attic and found both buckets empty. "I'm going to teach that bad cat a lesson. Cat, you ate everything up, and that is why you said a quarter, a half, and nothing." The cat denied the whole thing and said to the bear, "Let's make a test. We'll both lie in the sun for a while, and whoever ate the honey and the fat will sweat it out, and then we'll know." So they lay down in the sun, and the cat ran up to the attic and scraped what was left of the fat and the honey from the buckets and smeared it on the bear's fur. Then the bear woke up and looked at its sticky fur and said,
"Oh dear, I must have eaten it all. But when did I do it?"
When the cat saw the bear, it couldn't stop laughing. And it laughed, and it laughed, and it laughed, and it ran off into the forest. And the poor foolish bear lived unhappily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. The poor man's 9 hens and 1 cockerel. Once upon a time, there lived a poor man and his wife. And they had more children than there are holes in a sieve. The poor man only possessed 2 small oxen, and he went ploughing with them in the forest every day. He was ploughing there one day when he heard a kind of crying. A big brown bear was wrestling with a tiny rabbit. The poor man laughed heartily when he saw the peculiar sight, but this made the bear very angry indeed. "You'll see, poor man, I shall eat you up, oxen, plough, and all." This frightened the poor man, who said, "Oh bear, please don't eat me up, for I have a great number of children, and if I don't plough this field, there won't be any wheat, and then what will the little children eat? Please wait until the end of the day, when my ploughing will be done, and you can come here and eat me up, oxen, plough, and all." "Very well," the bear said, and it walked off into the forest. So the poor man went on ploughing, but he felt so sad that he did not know what to do with his sorrow. And as he stood feeling sad, a fox appeared. "Hey, poor man, why are you so sad?" "How could I not be?" And he told the fox about his promise to the bear. "Oh, there's no need to be sad. What will you give me if I help you? Do you have chickens in your yard at home?" "As a matter of fact, we do. My wife keeps 9 hens and a cockerel." "Well, if you give them all to me, I shall tell you what to do. I'll happily give them to you, and you can come and collect them later today. Poor man, I shall return this evening and hide behind a big bush. And then, when the big brown bear comes, I will..." Do you think that will work? It will. Poor man, I have come to eat you up, oxen, plough, and all. Very well, eat me. What's that noise, poor man? I don't know. Hunters might be coming with guns to shoot you. Oh, hide me somewhere. I'm so frightened. Here's a sack. Hide in here. So the bear hopped into the sack without a second word, and the poor man tied the sack tight. Then the fox came out from behind the big bush. And he began to feel the sack. What's in the sack, poor man? Nothing but a big noggin of firewood. I don't believe it. But that's what's inside. Well, if it is a noggin as you say, chop it with your axe. So then the poor man hit the sack hard with his axe, and the big brown bear was killed in an instant. Well then, poor man, you promised to give me 9 hens and a cockerel, and I shall go to collect them later tonight. So the poor man went home, unharnessed his oxen, went into the house, ate his supper, and went to his bed for the night. All of a sudden, he heard a knocking on the door. Who's there? "'Tis I, the fox. I've come to collect my 9 hens and a cockerel." "Very well. Wait until I get up and put my trousers on." But the poor man had no intention of dressing, and instead he said to his children, "Bark, children, bark." What was that? We forgot to lock our door before we went to bed, and all the dogs came in from the yard to sleep under our bed. Now they can smell a fox, and they want to eat you up. Oh, hold them, poor man, let me run away. Bark louder. "You see, Fox, I have learned something from you after all," said the poor man, and he turned to the wall and fell fast asleep. And he and his wife and all their children lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Pelican Bird. Once upon a time, there lived an old king, and the old king did not know whether to weep with sorrow or to weep with joy. My dear daughter, when I was young, I had a pelican bird that could sing so beautifully. And as long as I heard that pelican bird sing, I stayed forever young and forgot all my troubles in the world. But one day my pelican bird vanished overnight, and I searched far and near to find it again, but sadly failed, and that is why I feel such sorrow. But I also feel great joy, because in all my travels, far and near, I have never seen a maiden fairer than you, my dear. Well, Father dear, if that is so, I will not marry until somebody brings that singing pelican bird back to you. Oh, give it up, dear daughter, because you will die an old maid. No, Father, I will keep my vow. So the beautiful princess announced to all the world that she would only marry the man who brought back her father's singing pelican bird. So princes arrived and were sent forth to search the four corners of the world, but they all returned without the singing pelican bird. A handsome young tailor lived in the royal court, who could not bear to see his sovereign look so sad. So he packed his bag with bread, bacon and onions and set off in search of the singing pelican bird. The young tailor walked until he found himself in a dark forest, where he met a grey-haired beggar, and the beggar said, "Give me a slice of bread, and God will reward you." "Very well, old man, here you are. I know that you have come to this place to find the pelican bird. Many young princes have passed through this forest, and I asked them each for a slice of bread, but none of them helped me as you have, and they all went back to the palace empty-handed. A good deed deserves a just reward. The pelican bird is to be found beyond the vast ocean, but you cannot walk to this place. You need to go and see the old witch, who lives deeper still in the dark forest." "Greetings, old lady. Do you enjoy good health? What brings you to this far and forgotten place?" "I'm on a quest to find a pelican bird that can sing beautiful songs and flew away beyond the vast ocean. But I intend to cross that ocean because my king cannot live without his beloved pelican bird. If you will lend me your horse, I promise that the pelican bird will make you a girl again." "Go ahead and take my horse. It's tethered under the bridge." So the young tailor fetched the horse and saw it had a mane of gold. The horse suddenly spoke and said, "Climb on my back, master." "Master, I shall leave you now. You must travel on and ask about the whereabouts of the pelican bird, because one good question is worth 100 bad guesses." "Wait, I shall give you this whistle. If you're ever in trouble, blow it and I will appear." "Very well, horse," and the horse vanished. So the young tailor walked and walked until he met an ancient old woman. Old lady, please show me the way to the pelican bird. I plan to take it back to my king, whose heart is half filled with sorrow since it left him." "I know, my child. I'll happily show you the way. Do you see that distant forest? You will find the pelican bird stuck up in the highest tree. where the poor thing has been suffering all these long years. So the young tailor hurried to the distant forest and soon found the tallest tree. And there, sure enough, he sighted the pelican bird stuck up among its branches. He tried to climb the tall tree, but failed, and the young tailor was heartbroken. Did you call me, master? Yes, I did. The pelican bird is up in the tree, but I cannot climb it. Worry not, master. You just climb up on my back, and we shall fly to the top of the tree. With one hand you can lift up the tree branch, and with the other, take the bird and hold it good and tight. It took the young tailor a week and a day to journey back to the palace, where he tried to get the bird to sing for the king. Sing, Pelican Bird, we're home again at last. When they returned, the old king soon heard the pelican bird singing sweetly, and he was an old king no longer. Then they held a wonderful wedding feast, and all lived happily ever after. And that is where my story ends. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Rich Man's Three Sons. Once upon a time, there lived a rich man. One day, one of the rich man's farms burned to the ground, and nothing was left but a pile of smoking embers. The rich man had made his fortune as a moneylender, and one of his unhappy borrowers had burned his home down. The rich man felt terribly sad, and not even the priest could comfort him, as he was sure the man would eventually go to hell because of the cruel way he had made money all his life. That may well be true, the rich man thought. But if someone should burn down my other farm, how will my three sons survive? The rich man thought and thought about this until he decided to find all three a job. He made the eldest son a soldier because he was very bright. He made the middle son a blacksmith's apprentice. And then he spoke to the youngest of his three sons and said, "I think you will make a fine barber, son of mine." The youngest son had no objections, and all three agreed to do their father's bidding, as anything was better than working the land. The eldest liked the idea of marching around with a silver sword by his side, while the other two were happy that they would not have to hoe or mow now that they had proper trades. The years passed by, and the rich man became old, although he had never been a young man, and he spent all his time thinking how he could one day avoid hell's fiery furnace that had been promised to him by the priest. But the rich man's 3 sons did not have a care in the world. His son the soldier danced his days away, while his son the blacksmith and the barber spent all their days making merry. Then the day came when the sons received a letter saying that they should all 3 return home at once because their father's days were numbered, and he wanted to see his sons. So all 3 sons journeyed home and thought they would soon inherit a fortune from their rich father. When they arrived, the rich man asked his son the soldier, "Well, my son, what manner of soldier have you become?" "Well, my father, the emperor has no finer soldier than I, and I wield a silver sword like no other. The other day, it began to rain while we were on parade, and all the other soldiers got wet, but not I, because I drew my sword and span it around so swiftly above my head that I remained dry." The rich man nodded. "I'm glad, my son, that you have become such a fine soldier, and I have no need to worry about your fortune." Then he asked the middle son, "And you, my son, how do you fare as a blacksmith?" "Well, my father, there's no finer blacksmith in this land, or any other beyond its borders. Only yesterday, a coach passed by the smithy, drawn by 4 grey horses. The lord driving the coach said that all 4 horses needed reshoeing, but he had no time to stop. My master stood and scratched his head, but while he stood there, I swiftly shoed all 4 horses, and the coach did not have to stop for a single second." The rich man also noted his middle son's words. "You are indeed a master of your trade, my son, and I have no need to worry about your fortune. And you, my youngest son, are you also a master of your trade? You ask me if I'm a master barber, father? Well, nothing proves it better than the fact that I shaved a rabbit clean while it was running yesterday, and I did not cut its soft skin once." The rich man also noted his youngest son's words, and then spoke to all 3. "I see, my sons, that you all have the skill to make your own fortunes, and you have no need of mine. And so now I can use all of my money to pay myself out of hell's fiery furnace." Then the rich man called the priest, gave him all his money, and told him to give it to the poor. So the rich man's 3 sons were given nothing for their pains and ran away, never to return. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Bladder, the Straw, and the Hot Coal. Once upon a time, far, far away, to the border and beyond, there lived a bladder. One day the fat bladder began to feel bored, snapped its string and said, "Oh, I think I will go out and see the big wide world." So it rolled and it rolled down the road, and as it rolled, it met a straw. "Straw, where are you going?" "I'm going to hide. I fell out of the stove when the wife was lighting the fire, and I thought I'd run away." "Then let's go together." And the two of them walked and rolled, and as they did so, they met a hot coal. "Hot coal, where are you going?" "I'm going to hide. I fell out of the stove when the wife was poking the fire, and I thought I'd run away." "So let's go together." "Let's go." So the three friends rolled and walked and talked together. And they journeyed on until they came to a stream. There the bladder jumped into the water and quickly swam to the other side. The straw also jumped quickly into the water and swam to the other side. Then the hot coal began to cry, "How shall I swim to the other side? If I jump into the water, I'll stop being hot. Take me to the other side." The fat bladder sat on the riverbank and laughed so much that it burst apart and killed all three. So that was the end of 1 and 2 and 3. And if you know more to this story, you can tell it to me. Hungarian Folk Tales. The King's Bread. The king in this tale was tired of eating chicken and noodles and cake and milk and bread and other sweet treats every day, and so he issued an order that he should be served an extraordinary dish that he had never eaten before, but that it should be delicious. Well, the king's cook thought, I will do my very best. And the cook carried one spectacular dish after the last to the king's dining table. The cook tried all he could imagine: eggs with honey, pork with sugar, fish with cream, and walnuts baked in milk. But all to no avail, as the king was not impressed and pushed each away with a look of disgust. No sooner had the cook placed the 13th dish before the king when he roared, "Enough! If you fail to bring me a dish I have never tasted, I shall have your head cut off." So the poor cook returned to the kitchen feeling sad. He thought and thought, but he simply could not think of anything clever to cook for the king. He could almost feel the executioner's axe on the back of his neck. With no idea of what to cook, he took a loaf of bread and ran away from the royal palace. When time came for supper the following day, the king sat at his table, as he always did, but no dish was served before him. This had never happened in the palace before, and the king summoned for the cook to be brought before him, bound in chains. But where was the royal cook? They searched the palace high and low, but he was nowhere there. So then the king's carver said to the king, "Your Majesty, I have to tell you that the cook has run away." The king was furious. No supper, and now no cook. Was he the only man in the land to sit before a bare table when it was time to eat? So the king ordered his guards to saddle their horses, and he led them out of the palace on horseback, furious and famished. They set out after the cook, soon found his trail, and rode until they came to a great forest. Here they searched low and high until they sighted him atop a tree, and the king shouted up, "Come down, you wretch, or I shall shoot." But the cook decided not to move and pretended to be dead, held aloft by the tree's strong branches. So the king called his men to chop the tree down. But the guards worked as slowly as they could, because they all liked the cook very much indeed, and they felt sad for his sorry fate. The king would surely have the cook's head cut off, and they would be sorry to see him go, because he had the habit of giving them delicious tidbits that the king ignored. And the roast pork and chicken always made an excellent change to their daily ration of bread. The king soon saw that the guards were slacking and the tree would never be chopped down. Then the king's cook became so frightened by all the chopping that he dropped the loaf of bread he carried and it fell to the foot of the tree. The king saw the loaf and wondered what on earth it could be. "It is a loaf of bread, sire, and not for a king, but a poor man's food." The king broke a little off and tasted it. "Oh, I've never eaten such delicious food since I was a baby in my mother's arms." "You rogue, you never told me that you could cook food as delicious as this loaf of bread. Come down and I shall pardon you for all your sins." The king's cook now knew that he was safe, and so he climbed down the tree and stood before his sovereign. "Cook, I order you that from now on, whatever you serve on my royal table must be accompanied by bread."